Hi guys, good afternoon. Welcome to this session on sentence completion and sentence rearrangement with Bullseye. My name is Miti. So today our task is divided into two halves. We are going to start with sentence completion, learn a couple of tricks and strategies to do these questions, practice a couple of questions, then take a 5 to 8 minutes thought-provoking session where I'm going to take up your doubts. Please try not to post your doubts in between because we want to finish our session as soon as possible and cover all the tasks designed for today. Then we're going to move on to task 2 for the day, which is sentence rearrangement. Cover the concepts, the strategies, practice a couple of questions and then take up your doubts again. Let's move on for the task of the day with sentence completion with the big bull. Okay, so what we're going to learn today in sentence completion strategy is the anticipation, the keywords, the flags and the appositions. What are these techniques? We are going to discuss in the further slides and then practice a couple of questions on it. So the sentence completion questions, what is the structure of the question? The question usually comes with a sentence of 1, 2, 3 lines and may have blanks ranging from 1 to 2, and for each blank you are given 4 options. In cases when you have 2 blanks, you are given sets of options. For instance, in this question, if I have 2 blanks, I'll have my options as A, B, the second option will be C, D, and so on. Moving on to our strategy, anticipation of the blanks. So we know how a bowler throws a ball. The bowler realizes how the batsman is placing his bat, where is his front foot, and then accordingly he throws the ball. You have to apply the similar kind of thought process when solving sentence completion questions. Anticipate with the tone of the sentence that what kind of a word could fit in, whether it would be positive, whether it would be negative. Let us take a small example. If I tell you Ram is a dash boy and I give you the options as good, bad, naughty and punctual, you would think that all these options could fit in here. But what if I say the next sentence as he broke the television yesterday? So now you can eliminate the 2 options which were positive, good and punctual. You're left with only 2 options, which is bad and naughty. Knowing that the second half of the sentence, the fact that he broke the television is notorious, you would pick the option naughty. So you would say Ram is a naughty boy, full stop, he broke the television yesterday. This also suggests that you should always read the question carefully and try to anticipate what kind of word or what kind of tone could fit in there. Moving on, let's look at a couple of sentences on the same concept. Okay, so Rohit experienced great dash when his pet dog died. Obviously the fact that someone's dog has passed away is a sad thing, which means a word that denotes something sad or that kind of an emotion would fit in here. So you could say Rohit experienced great sadness, or Rohit experienced great melancholy, or Rohit experienced great sorrow when his pet dog died. Let's move on to the second one. The earthquake warnings and the fragility of the houses makes us certain that the disaster is. Okay, from this sentence you are getting 2-3 hints. So you know that there are earthquake warnings and that the houses are fragile, and also that the people are certain that disaster will happen, which means this blank may have words like inevitable or unavoidable. I hope the second example is clear to you. Just by the fact that we know that the disaster is certain, we know it is unavoidable, or a synonym for which is inevitable. Let's move on to the third one. The committee were in favor of the proposal, but the president dash it. I'm waiting for your responses. What do you guys think could fit in the third blank? Yes, you guys are right. This will have a negative word. Why? Because the sentence, the tone of the sentence suggests that the committee was actually in favor of the proposal, but the word but tells us that there is contradiction, right? So the contradiction would tell that if the first part is positive, the second will be negative. So you could use words like opposed, denied, turned down the proposal. Great. So I think some of you have doubt with the question number 2. Let me explain the question to you with simple language. So question number 2 here says the earthquake warnings and the fragility of the houses makes us certain that the disaster is dash. So we know that the person here is saying that the disaster is going to happen for sure. Why? Because there are earthquake warnings and the houses are fragile. So we have to use a word that suggests the surety of the disaster. Such words could be either inevitable or bound to happen or unavoidable, all of which denote the surety of the disaster. I hope this is clear to all of you now. Great. Let's move on to the next strategy. The next strategy is of keywords. You should always pay close attention to the keywords. Now what these keywords could be. Remember, as we just discussed in the beginning of this lecture, that you should always read the sentence very carefully before moving on to the options. Let's look at an example and see how we can put this concept of keywords into place here. So the first example says, because of the heavy rainfall in the spring, the tenants were dash about the flooding. Now the keyword here is heavy rainfall. So now if heavy rainfall is happening and then there are tenants, they would obviously be worried about their homes, that the heavy rainfall might not cause some kind of problem to their homes. So you could use a word that suggests worrisome nature of the tenants because of the rainfall. So we could use words like because of the heavy rainfall in the spring, the tenants were worried about flooding. Let's apply the same concept of keywords to the second question. Despite the heavy rainfall, the tenants were dash about the flooding. Now here you see a slight change in the usage of words. The word despite means halaki, which puts a condition, which means irrespective of. So here, because of the usage of this word despite, the whole meaning of the sentence changes. So you see the word keyword here is despite, which suggests that even though there was heavy rainfall, the tenants were not worried. I hope there is clarity to all of you regarding the stark difference of how one single keyword can change the meaning of both the statements and hence the blank that comes in. Yeah, great. Let's move on to the third example. I'm leaving this one to all of you to anticipate and fill in. Okay, let me give you a slight hint. I think some of you are struggling with this question. The word although tells you change of tone, right? Although means again, just like despite, that even though my uncle is usually a generous person. So when I say even though, there has to be a change of tone. That even though he is good at something, but he still probably, did bad at something. So when I say although, the first half is positive, which suggests that second half should here be negative. Yesterday he gave nothing to a woman soliciting for a popular charity. Yes, you guys are all right. Okay, let's move on to the next strategy. What are the flag words? The strategy here suggests that there are certain number of words that always suggest what kind of tone or what kind of word would be there. We had just looked at two examples, despite and although, which you will see in the upcoming list. Okay, opposite flags. When I say opposite flags, it means if the tone first was positive, it will change to negative, and if the tone first was negative, it will change to positive. We just saw two examples of these words in our previous slide. Opposite flags word include although, despite, but, even though, instead of, nevertheless, contrary to, rather than, in spite of, and however. Please remember, whenever you have these words, any of these words, the tone would always reverse. If it was positive first, it will become negative in the second half of the sentence, and if the first half of the sentence has a word that is negative, the rest half would have a positive tone. Moving towards the words that suggest there is no change of tone, which means it would remain same, are since, thus, therefore, as, hence, because, for instance, and, moreover, so, due to. Okay, I think the word and is repeated here. It should be a full stop. I'm going to give you guys a couple of seconds to note down all these words and gauge them. Great. Let's move on to practicing a couple of questions on the same strategy of recognizing the flag words into perspective here. Even though he had not eaten all day and had dash money in his pocket, David dashed the offer of a meal. We just saw that the word even though suggests a change of tone. So which of these options do you guys think suggests a change of tone, the words that have opposite meanings? Guys, always remember to read the questions carefully, understand its meaning, and only then proceed with the options. Yes guys, most of you are right. The answer here is little and declined. Let us quickly look at the question and see where there was a gap in understanding. So the sentence here said, even though he had not eaten all day. So you already see that there is again a negative here that is already suggesting that he had not eaten all day and had little money. So if someone has not eaten all day, he probably does not have a lot of money. So as you guys were saying, considerable means manageable, theek thak. So that suggests that he had no money or he had very little money, and that's why probably he did not eat. So he had not eaten, and even though he had no money, no food, he still declined the offer to eat. So you guys might have got confused with option number A, because you see the second part here fits correctly. Refused could have correctly fit in here in the next one, but the fact is the first option wasn't correctly placed. So remember, when you have two options in a single question, always look at the fact that both the words should correctly fit in the question and not just one. I hope this is clear to all of you. Perfect. Let's move on. The last strategy for us is identifying the apposition structure. When I say the word apposition, I mean how the words are placed next to each other. That identifies the apposition structure. So when you are reading the statement, always remember that in these sentences, the second clause clarifies or gives evidence for the first choice, which means that the first blank and the second blank will be connected, and sometimes if you are not getting a hint about the first blank, always take hints from the second blank and fill in the first blank accordingly. Most of these sentences are long. Wherever we have to apply the apposition strategy, these sentences are usually long and they are separated by commas, semicolons, hyphens, parentheses, etc. Okay. Also, the comma is not followed by words like and, for, yet. This is just a general strategy to help support the second argument. Let us see how we can apply this strategy into a question. So you see, this is a pretty long sentence and it has two blanks separated by a comma. Here we are not seeing any flag words or any keywords that would suggest what kind of tone it is. So all we have to rely on is the apposition structure, where the blanks are placed side to side. So when I say this book conveys, this book of Conway creates a mood of dash and a dash of tranquility and calm. So you see, when I am using commas, I will probably suggest the same type of things. So if I'm talking about types of stationery, I'll say sharpener, comma, eraser, comma, pencil. I'll not place a boat in between the stationery because I'm talking about similar kind of items. So a comma not only suggests additionality but also a bit of similarity. I hope guys the question is clear to you. Before you start attempting it, always try and understand the meaning of the question and the theme that it is trying to suggest. Okay, so as I said that the comma, some of you have given the correct answer. The correct answer here is option number C. Why? Please listen to this one carefully. As I said, when there is apposition structure, when the blanks are placed next to each other, it suggests that the second blank or the next half of the sentence is going to give you hints about the first half. Also, when you have commas, it suggests additionality. So obviously when I'm talking about something that is related to tranquility, what does the word tranquility mean, you might ask? Tranquility means a feeling of comfort or a feeling of calmness. So again, my word in the first blank has to match the theme of the second blank, which here is the word serenity. Serenity is also a synonym for the word calm. Again, we cannot use the word sadness because it's a negative word. Formality wouldn't really go in theme or in conjugation with the word tranquility, so that option can also be eliminated. Again, somberness is not really related to the word calm, so that also eliminates the last option, leaving us with our best possible choice as serenity. As you see here again, for the second blank, the word feeling or ambience or atmosphere, any of these could have fit in. But the problem here was that we had to check for the first option as well. Remember, check clearly for all the options and not just one single option. It is very important to eliminate options and eliminate choices in such questions to get 100% accuracy in your questions. Moving on, let us finally summarize and look at what would be the best strategy to cover such questions. As I said earlier, I'm going to reiterate, always read the question very carefully. It is very important to understand the context before we attempt the question. Anticipate the blanks and tones. Guys, again and again I'm reiterating, this is a huge mistake that most of us make while doing these questions. Do not look at the options first. Always look at the question first, understand the questions, anticipate what kind of word could fit in, positive, negative, neutral, what kind of word could fit in, and only then go back to your options. So you have to anticipate the blanks and the tone, look for the hints, which are the flags and the keywords if you could get any in your sentence. Eliminate the wrong options, the same thing that we did in our previous question, right? So we were looking at all the options and we eliminated the ones that could not fit into the question correctly, and then we moved on to our best possible choice. I hope the strategy is clear to all of you. Perfect. Let's move on to the next half, but before that, as I promised, I'm going to give you guys the next 5 minutes to ponder on and go through everything that we have just learned and pose if you guys have any questions. Okay, so some of you want me to move the slide to the flags. Here it is. Remember, opposite flags indicate change of tone and same flags indicate similarity of tone. Let's move on and practice a few questions on what all we just learned. This is your question number 1 on sentence completion. I'm going to give you guys almost a minute to complete it. Think about it. Also in these questions, I am not looking for just the right answer. Please tell me, what do you guys think is the keyword? How did you identify why it will be a particular answer? Great. Most of you have got the answer correct. The correct answer here is splendor and poverty. And I think you guys have also spotted all the keywords very correctly. Let's now crack the question, look it up from scratch and see if there were any mistakes we made. So the first keyword here is although. It's giving us a flag telling us that there's going to be change of tone. Moving on, we are applying the concept of apposition here. So if you're talking about similar things, you have the word and. So with the word luxury, luxury is a positive word. The second blank with luxury here, the first blank in conjugation with luxury also has to be positive. That eliminates this option and this option. Obviously, we are left with the words splendor, comfort and probably love. Not the strongest option, but we can still consider it. Moving on, the second half of the sentence talks about the word terrible, indicating that here with the word terrible, a negative word is going to come in conjugation with it. So the word luxury and another positive word is here, and the next set is going to be with the word negative. So you see how there's a change of tone with the usage of the keyword although. So the options that we have here, we have already eliminated option number 1 and option A and option E. Moving on, the second word has to be negative, which tells us that it cannot again be option number C. leaving us with the options poverty and cruelty. So here we are trying to indicate through the meaning of the sentence that and the context of the sentence that the government is living well off, but the general people are in probably a terrible state. So the better option here is poverty and not cruelty, because we are talking about a terrible state that the people are in, and cruelty is usually done to people. People don't live in a cruel state, it's done to people. I hope this is clear to everybody. Moving on, let us practice another question. Guys, also remember that apart from the fact that you have to have a good understanding of the statement, you might also need a little bit of vocabulary, because sometimes the questions come which are testing you on the basis of vocabulary as well. So as you can see, there are certain words here for which the meaning might not be clear to all of you. Okay, great. Most of you have got the answer right, but before I tell you the correct answer or the final answer, let us look at the meaning of all the words. The word prolix means something that is boring or lethargic or something that is repetitive or unoriginal. Inarticulate means something that cannot be presented in an articulate fashion, not comprehensive, not persuasive, not understandable. So that is inarticulate. Novice and amateur, both of these are synonyms to each other, which means someone who's a beginner, someone who does not know how to do things well because they are just in the initial stages of learning. Moving on, eloquent means someone who's well practiced and presents themselves in a nice manner, in a flawless manner. So as you see the sentence here, he is dash speaker, comma, his discourses are always informative and inspirational. So you see the words here given are positive in nature. That suggests that his speeches, or the fact that what kind of a speaker he is, the word here also should be positive, because when I'm giving the explanation of his speeches, I'm using positive words. So the blank here should also be positive. That suggests that the best choice here is elegant. Nohina, the word novice only means someone who's an amateur, not brave. Let's do one last question on this topic. This is a slightly tough one. Please don't make guesses. Understand the meaning of the statement and only then attempt the question. Okay, let us discuss this tricky one. Before we move on to the answer, let me tell you the meaning of the whole statement and how we are deriving keywords and hints for this question. Please look at this one carefully. Okay. So the statement here suggests that the client is making certain kind of requirements for the new design, but it does not make designers feel a certain way, the blank that we still have to talk about, when it comes to research and development because of the profit. So the keyword here that is giving us all the hints is of the profit potential, which means the client is making certain kind of requirements, but the designers do not feel a certain way because they know they are going to get profit, which means the client is probably making a difficult demand, but the designers are not disheartened by it because they know that they are going to get the profit. I hope now that the statement is clarified to all of you with respect to its understanding. Great. Let's move on to the option. Okay, some of you are asking me to repeat the meaning of the statement. Okay, so the statement here suggests, we know the keyword here, the profit potential, which means that the designers already know that they are going to get profit, right? The comma here and the do not suggest the connectivity between the first blank and the second blank. So we know that the client is probably making some difficult kind of requirements for the design, but the designers will not be disheartened because they know that they are going to get the profit. Moving on, let us look at the options. So as we just discussed, the first blank should suggest something negative because the client is giving them some difficult design or a difficult task. So we see the word toilsome, onerous, complex, vague and arduous. All of them suggest certain kind of negativity, but vague means something that is not very clear. That removes option number D from our choices, and we are left with option A, B, C and D, A, B, C and E, all of which suggest a complex kind or a difficult kind of task. Moving on to the second one, we know that the designers are not disheartened because they know they will get profit. So provoke is a positive word, right? Which suggests that this option cannot be there because here the second part is absolutely wrong. Provoke means causing a provocation, poking somebody or instigating somebody to cause something. So it can be taken either way. That's why option A is eliminated. Moving on, dissuade means discourage. Again, this may be one of our good choices because you see, the task is difficult. Onerous is something that is difficult and requires a lot of effort. Dissuade means dishearten. So which means this could probably be one of our choices. Let's see if we have a better option. Complex, difficult, encourage. The word encourage cannot come here because as we looked at it, we are looking for something that gives us a negative word here because the designers are not disheartened or are not discouraged. So that eliminates option C. Moving on, we see option number E, the word incite is very similar to the word provoke. Both of them mean causing a provocation or causing a stimulus. Eliminating this option again, and we are left with option B, which is our best possible choice and which was correctly fitting in meaning with the given sentence and its context. I hope there is clarity to all of you. Is there anything else you guys want to ask about this topic? And can we move on to the second task, sentence rearrangement? Okay, some of you are asking me the meanings of the words. Let's look at it once again. So the correct answer here was onerous. The word onerous means something that is difficult to do, something that requires a lot of effort. Dissuade means discourage. The word incite and provoke are almost synonyms to each other. Both of them mean causing a stimulus or causing a provocation. Vague means something that is not very clear, and arduous means something that is very difficult to do and requires a lot of effort. But we eliminated option number E because the second part was incorrect. Perfect. I hope the doubts for all of you are clear now. And we can move on to sentence rearrangement. Let us start with the task 2 of the day, which is sentence rearrangement. So today we'll be covering a couple of strategies, how to proceed with the question, how do you get the hints, how do you eliminate options, all these things about sentence rearrangement, and how you can get the best possible strategy, crack your question within limited time and with 100% accuracy. So today we'll be discussing how do you understand the main idea, what are the strategies for opening sentence, sentence pair, and then how do you check coherence and sequence for a sentence rearrangement question. Moving on, a sentence rearrangement question is usually divided into 3 parts. The first part is the introduction, which is usually your first statement, which is always the first statement. The next sentences are taken together and are considered as the chunk of the question, called as the body, and the last statement being the conclusion. Let us now one by one look at the strategies to identify these statements. So the introduction usually is very general and it talks about the further sentences that are describing what the introduction has just mentioned, right? So if I have to tell my parents about a friend who is studying in my class, I would start by saying that my friend's name is XYZ. Then I will start by describing him or the fact that he studies in my class. He's a very bright student. He's appearing for CLAT, IPM this year, and we try and study together to help and clear each other's doubts. So you see, in this example, I started by introducing that person by telling his or her name to my parents, right? So that tells us introductions are usually general. When I say independent, it means they are grammatically independent and also in terms of sense, which means they can exist on their own and they are not dependent on any other statement. Then you'll ask me, what do you mean by the fact dependent? So if I say a statement, this is a great nation. This statement is dependent. How? When I say this, Then you'll question me, which nation are you referring to? Which means there has to be a statement before this where I tell you what nation I am referring to. So if I say India is a land of multicultural diversity, full stop, and then I say this is a great nation. So the this here refers to the India which was mentioned in the previous statement. So that is what I mean when I say independent and dependent. Moving on, we just talked about how an introduction introduces the idea which is discussed in the forthcoming lines. Also, a tiny bit of disclaimer about introduction. These lines are the easiest to identify just by the fact that they are not very specific, they are very general, and they are independent in nature with respect to grammar and sense. Moving on, how do you identify the statements in body? Now, these statements could range from 2 to 3 or 4. The chunk that is in between. We are also going to talk about the strategies to find out how these statements would be organized in the upcoming slide. For now, let us look at the description of these lines. So as we just talked about that they contain details and description. Remember the example that I just gave you guys about how I'm talking to my parents about a friend who studies with me in the same class. I was telling in detail that, this friend studies with me in the class, that he's a bright student, and the fact that he's appearing for certain competitive examinations. So that suggests that the body usually contains details and description about the topic that was introduced in the first statement. Moving on, you will also find data, numbers, facts and figures. If you have any line that quotes data, facts, figures, it is usually a part of the central chunk of your sentence rearrangement question. The order usually goes from general to specific. Reiterating the same thing, I would start something very general in the beginning and then go on to its specification. Again, as I said, the statements are dependent on each other. Remember the India example that I just gave you? So the statements are dependent on each other. How they are dependent? How do you find out which statement should be first and which statement should be second in these chunk of 2, 3 or 4 statements? We are going to talk about all those strategies in the next slide. Again, they can be arranged on the basis of mandatory pairs. Mandatory pairs we still have to discuss, but before that, let us generally talk about what the conclusion denotes. So, as we know that the conclusion closes the argument that is being discussed in the previous lines, which is the introduction and the body. Again, the statements may start with words like thus, hence, thence, therefore, so, etc. Which means if a sentence has words like these, there is a good probability that it would be the last statement. Remember, I'm saying the fact that it will be a good probability, not the fact that it is always going to be the last statement. They may contain opinions and suggestions. Obviously, I'm closing an argument. I might just end it with a summary, with an opinion or a suggestion. Also, the last line of your sentence rearrangement will never ever start a new argument. Remember this line, it's an important one. The fact that the conclusion will never have a new argument. So if you have a new argument, if you have a new data, a new concept or a new person, you will always place it either in the body or in the introduction, but never in the conclusion, because conclusion always closes the argument. Some of you are having doubts regarding the body. Please have patience, because regarding the body we are going to in detail discuss how do you place the statements next to each other in the next slide. This is just a general description. There's nothing specific on it. Moving on, as I said, we are going to talk about how these statements are dependent on each other and how you form mandatory pairs. Mandatory means compulsory, right? Irrespective of what, these two statements will come together. And how do you identify that in a body? Because you may have 2, 3 or 4 statements. How will you identify which statement to be placed first, which statement to be placed second, and if there are 4 statements, what is going to be the best logical order? So for that, let us look at a few strategies. So these mandatory pairs are as good as Tom and Jerry. They always stay together. So the first one is noun pronoun. What does noun pronoun suggest? So if I am saying a statement that Ram is a good boy, full stop, and I say he studies at Bullseye, right? So the Ram in the sentence 1 is referred to as he in sentence 2. So this is the noun here which is referred to as he in the next statement. So these two statements are always going to be together because of the noun-pronoun pair. Moving on to the keywords. So keywords suggest the main topic or the central idea that I am reflecting in a statement. So say I have 4 statements, out of which in 2 statements I am talking about coal, and in 2 statements I am talking about petrol, and the statement is probably about electricity production. So these 2 statements have a similar keyword which is coal, and these 2 statements have a similar keyword petrol, suggesting that these 2 statements on coal will always be together and these 2 statements on petrol will always be together. We are going to practice a couple of questions on all these strategies, on all the mandatory pair strategies, and then you'll have perfect clarity about this concept. Moving on, the next is the cause-effect pair. So the cause is always followed by its effect. Similarly, a problem is always followed by its solution or its explanation, right? And similarly, an argument is always followed by its explanation or description. So these are a couple of mandatory pairs. The cause comes first and the effect later. The problem comes first and its solution later. And similarly, an argument comes first and its description later. I think we have put the word keywords twice here. Shouldn't be there. Moving on to the next strategy of mandatory pairs, which is tone. So tone is how you are saying an argument, how you are presenting an argument. A tone can be negative, it can be positive, it can be neutral. But always remember that you never hop tones when you are doing a sentence rearrangement. You always have to follow a certain pattern of tone. So say I am being very critical about a certain topic, but at the same time I am saying good things about it also. So what I'll do, either I'll say all positive things first and then negative, or I'll say a positive argument, then a negative argument, then another positive and another negative. These two follow a pattern, right? Or just say that the negative first and the positive later. Either way, but I will never hop tones, which means I will never arrange my tone or the type of sentences that I am saying in a random order, like negative, positive, positive, negative, or positive, negative, negative, positive. This is a random order. This is not following a pattern. Your tone should always follow a pattern. So either put it in chunks or put it in alternate pair. Moving on to the last one, which is chronology. The keyword chron means related to time. So you have to check the chronology in 2 ways. That the events that are mentioned in your sentence rearrangement question should follow a pattern of time, which means if I have 3 statements and one talks about 1920, one talks about 1905, and another one talks about 2005, then I will arrange them in a chronological order, which means it should either be 1905, 1920, and then 2005 going this way, or it could be 2005, 1920, and then 1905, either in the ascending order or descending order, suggesting that you have to follow chronology and do not put the years or the frame of time randomly, whether it's years, whether it's months, or you do not put it randomly. The second thing that you have to check when you're talking about chronology is the tense. Something very basic that we all know. Past is followed by present, which is followed by future, which means I will not start talking about future, then talk about past, and then talk about present. I can go backwards also. This is past, present, future, and I can start with future, then come to present, and then go to past. But I will never randomly mix it up. Always follow an order, whether it's respect to tense or whether it's respect to time. I hope all the strategies of forming mandatory pairs are clear to all of you. Is there something that you would like me to repeat? Okay. So Anjani wants to talk about keywords. Guys, please put in your queries if there is anything else that you guys want me to repeat with respect of mandatory pairs. So keywords, when I say keyword, it means the thing that is being talked about, a certain kind of word that is being referred to in a particular statement. So let's say that I have 4 statements in a question, in a sentence rearrangement, randomly arranged, and 2 of these statements are talking about cake and 2 of these statements are talking about stationery. So these 2 statements are always going to be together no matter what. I will not put my sentence rearrangement as cake, stationery, cake, stationery. No. I will put the statements with cake together, cake, cake together, and then stationery, stationery together, suggesting that the sentences with the same keywords always come together. I hope all of you have clarity on this one. Shall we move ahead and practice a few questions? Perfect. Let's move on. Okay, so this question here, I have clearly given you the statement 1 and I have clearly given you statement number 6. All you have to do is arrange the statements in between. I'm going to give you guys 1 minute to read and understand the context of the question. Remember, it is very important to understand what the statements are saying before we start solving the question. Once you understand, it's very easy to solve the question in limited time and get 100% accuracy. Take a minute, understand the question, and then we'll solve the question from scratch. Okay, great. Let's move on and solve this question from scratch. Most of you have got the mandatory pairs correctly, but let us understand what the question is trying to say and then solve the question. So the first statement here, we have a hint. They've already told us in this question what the first sentence is going to be. What does the state do in a country where tax morality is very low? Remember, the keyword here is the fact that what should a state do where in a country where tax morality is low. When you look at all your sentences, you see that there are 3 statements that are starting with it, A, B and D. This it could refer to the state, suggesting that A, B and D, all of these statements should come probably in the first half of the statement, which is near sentence 1 and not near sentence 6. This is our first option. Guys, you're looking for options right now. There are certain questions that we are going to practice with the options, but here I'm not giving you options because we want to solve the questions from scratch and understand the thought process behind cracking a question and not just do it via options. Options make it quicker. We will move on to the questions where we discuss questions with options as well. Okay, moving on, let us read the statements. A statement says it tries to spy upon the taxpayers. B says it investigates income sources and spending patterns. So obviously you will spy first on someone and only then you will be able to find out their income sources and spending patterns, which suggests that A should be before B. So when you spy and only then you come to know how somebody has a certain income or how they spend that money, suggesting that we have A and B as our mandatory pair. Remember what I said in the beginning, that the keyword it, which refers to the state, suggests that all these 3 statements should be in the first half of the sentence and not in the second half. So first is here, sixth is here. Okay, we are going to fill in the blanks once we read all the statements. Moving on, statement C says exactly what the tax authority tries to do even now if inconsistently. So you read the statement and you understand this one is very disjointed from what A, B and D are trying to say, right? Which means that this should probably be in the second half of the statement because it does not seem connected to statement 1, A, B or D in any way. Moving on, the next statement D, it could also encourage. Remember the keyword here also. Also says additionality. Additionality तो तभी आएगी ना जब इससे पहले मैंने कोई और बात कही हो. तो मैंने पहले ये बात कह दी A और B में कि that the state in a country does spying and finding out about income sources and spending patterns, and then only I'll give you an other additional information regarding also. So which suggests that D should probably be after A and B. Also because of the keyword it, all three of them come together. Moving on to option E, prosperous neighbors who may be suspected of not paying their taxes properly. I think this is misspelled. It should be taxes properly and not property. Please correct that. So you see how statement D and E are following a pattern, because you're talking about how people do not pay taxes in statement E, which troubles the authorities. But at the same time, you see that if somebody has prosperous neighbors, someone who lives next to them who's probably not as prosperous might try to tell the authorities about them. So D and E are forming a similar kind of idea, suggesting that they are a mandatory pair. So now you see we have two mandatory pairs. We have A and B, and we have D and E. Because of the keyword it, we know that A, B will be followed by D, also because of the keyword also. I'll tell you about certain thing and only then I'll tell you an additional information about it, suggesting us that, this should be D and E, that the arrangement here should be A, B, D and E for now. Now we are left with option C, which is pretty disjointed and we don't know where to place it. Let's read the statement first and find out where it could be placed. Exactly what the tax authorities try to do, even if inconsistently. So it's telling us that there are tax authorities which are trying to do something which is not probably consistent. We learned in statement D and E that there are people who denounce taxes and then there are neighbors who tell the authorities about it. So probably statement D is co-jointed with E, telling that the tax authorities try to collect taxes, but even if it is inconsistent, they still follow the same kind of procedure. Also, we know that the keyword state was connecting to the idea of A, B and D with the statement it. That suggests there's only one place left for C, which is after E. 1, A, B, D, E, C, 6 is our correct order. I hope this is clear to all of you. If there is something about this question, if there is something that you guys did not understand, please let me know. Perfect. Let's move on and apply this strategy to another question. Please take hints. We just talked about keywords and I gave you a similar kind of example. So try to recall this, read this question and then we'll crack it. I'll make it a little easier for you guys and give you options for this question. Remember, it's going on the same pattern. Sentence 1 and sentence 6 are fixed. You just have to figure out the sentences in between. We have 3 options on board. Think this through, take your time, look for the flag words, look for the keywords. You have ample number of keywords in this question. Great. Most of you have got this one correct. The correct answer here is option number 1, DACB. Let's see how we reached to this conclusion. There are 2 statements here that are talking about petroleum and there are 2 statements that are talking about coal. So the 2 statements that are talking about petroleum are A and D, suggesting that these 2 statements will definitely be together. Okay, moving on, remember how I told you guys that the order always goes from general to specific. You see how statement number D is pretty general, but statement A is a little specific because it's giving us data and it's giving us details about the petroleum products and their demand that was mentioned in statement D, suggesting that D and A would be together. Moving on, the next 2 statements are about coal. So that is B and C. So this question we could have done by option elimination, but let's see how B and C logically connect. So you see that there is only one statement here that talks about coal, but you're talking about electricity generation requirements. We all know that on a large scale, for so many billion units, we never use petrol to produce electricity. In all the plants, it's coal that is used to generate electricity and never petrol. Right? So even though the word coal is not mentioned here, it definitely suggests that B is talking about coal and not about petroleum, because you're talking about electricity in mass production. Also, The statement C is a little general about coal and B is a little bit more specific, that is talking about the requirements of coal and how they are or how they have increased over the years with respect to units. That says C and B should be together. Now you would again wonder, why would C and B not be first and D and A not be last? So the order could also be DACB, or it could be CBDA. One thing definitely suggests that it was not on the option, but let me tell you why, irrespective of the options that we had, why logically D and A came first and not C and B. If you read the last line carefully, it is talking about electricity going to play a major role in the development of infrastructural facilities. So if I'm talking about electricity going to play a major role in infrastructure, which means I need electricity on a larger scale, mass production. And as we just talked about it, electricity on a larger scale on mass production will be produced by coal and not by petroleum. That is why C and B go perfectly with 6th and not with the first one. I hope this is clear to all of you. Perfect. Let's move on and practice a few questions, but before we go there, let's look at a final sealing strategy for these questions. As I said, try to locate the introductory statements. They are very easy to identify because they are very general. We have not done any questions as of now which identify the introductory statement, because in both the questions we were told the first statement already. But in the forthcoming examples, we are going to practice questions where we have to locate the introductory sentence. Again, make mandatory pair and then anticipate the order. That's what we were doing in these previous questions. We were anticipating the order, trying to guess what statement could come first on the basis of the mandatory pair and then confirm with the closest option. Kids, remember that the best strategy here is not to solve the question in one single go. You should never solve a sentence rearrangement question, read it once and then solve it khatakat one by one. No, never do that. Always make mandatory pairs. Always identify the first statement or a last statement, whichever you find it easier to identify. And for the rest of it, just plug in the options, just fill in the blanks. It gets easier to solve. Also, your accuracy becomes 100%. Again, if you solve the question in a single go, there's a good chance that you might make a mistake, and in case you make a mistake, you will have to redo the whole question. But if you solve it in chunks by making mandatory pair, if you make a mistake, you will only have to solve the last step and not the previous steps. Let's practice a few questions. We did some on sentence completion. Let's move on to this. Let's solve this question which has 4 statements. I'm going to give you guys 1.5 minutes. Try to understand. These statements are a little huge. So even before you identify the keywords, try to understand. Okay, so Jobinpreet, you're asking the need for doing questions on preposition. Yes, Jobinpreet, you might want to go through prepositions because again, fill in the blanks questions can come via preposition, but they are not very difficult. So even if you are doing the basics, I think that should help you enough. Great. All of you have got the answer correct. The correct answer here is option number 1, A, C, D, D. I'm quickly going to tell you the keywords and the hints that we got here. You see, there are 2 statements that are talking about mammals and there are 2 statements that are talking about textbook, which suggests that they would both be together with respect to keywords. And again, with respect to noun-pronoun pair, we are making the order here. So you see, all mammals in statement 1 has been referred to these animals in statement C. So the noun comes first and the pronoun comes later. Similarly, the reference here of many textbooks in statement D is referred to as these textbooks. So these being a pronoun will come later, suggesting that D should come first and B should come later. Do you guys have any doubts? Do you guys want me to explain this question in detail from scratch? Should we proceed to the next question? Perfect. Let's move on and do one more. Great, perfect. All of you have got this question correct. The correct answer here is option number 1. I think we've all got it correct. We really don't need to do this one. Let's move on to the last question for the session. Okay, this was a little tricky one, but before I tell you the correct answer, let us look at the flags and then we'll see if you've understood the question correctly. So let's see what are the flags that we are getting here. Let's solve the question from scratch. Let's look at sentence A. The Earth's core extends from its center to about 55% of the Earth's radius, or about 2,900 km below our feet. So this statement is basically talking about detail of the Earth's core, right? That it's giving us detail that it is, even though it contributes maximum of the Earth's radius, it is still so far from our feet. Sentence B says, and yet its effect on humanity are immense. So you see that there is a slight connectivity between statement A and B, because I'm saying that even though the core is so far, it still has an effect on humanity, which is suggesting that we might have a mandatory pair, but we are not too sure, so we are not going to stick to this and see if we can get any other hint. But at the back of your mind, keep in mind that here they are trying to say that it's so far, but it still has an effect on us. Moving on, statement C says the liquid outer core generates the Earth's magnetic field that shields us and all other living things from solar wind. This is again giving us a general description about the Earth's core and the magnetic field it produces. So we'll just understand this, keep this on the side, just shelf the information in our head and move on to understanding the other two statements. Statement D is talking about the provision of heat, or the heat that comes from the core, and the fact that it is able to influence mantle convection and hence tectonic motion, leading to earthquakes and volcanism. So this statement is talking about heat with respect to the core of the earth. Statement E, on the other hand, is again talking about how hot the core is. So you see that you have two statements here which are talking about the heat, and at the same time you have a noun-pronoun pair. How the events that are mentioned in D are referred to as these in statement E. So this is giving us one specific mandatory pair in this question, which is D and E, and we also are very confirmed about the order, the fact that D will come first and E will come later because of the noun-pronoun pair. Now let us quickly scan the options and see if there is any option that we have that has D and E mandatory pair together. We have option A, 2 we can eliminate, C we can eliminate, and we have 4, and 5 we can eliminate. Always remember guys how I told you that always form mandatory pair and then you can solve the rest of the questions. So the easier thing that gets for you guys is that we did find a strong mandatory pair. You see, we also had a little bit of hint from statement A and B. Why we did not pick it? Because we were not very sure about it. Your question will have 100% accuracy if you pick one sure shot mandatory pair and then just eliminate options on the basis of it. So we just have two options that have D and E together. Now considering that this option starts with statement B, and yet, we know that a statement will not start with and yet. Why? Because it is dependent. You have to tell me a preceding process before you tell me why are you saying yet, or why are you adding an and to it. That leaves us with one best possible choice, which is A, B, C, D and E. Also in the beginning of this question we just talked about how B is carrying forward the idea that A is saying, that even though that the core is so far from the earth, it is still having effects. So you see how A, B, C and D becomes the correct logical order. I hope everybody has clarity on this one. If anybody still has doubt, please tell me. Perfect. So we have the last 10 minutes. I'm glad that today we have time on our hands to take up doubts. The last class we ran a little bit out of time. So at least we have time today. Okay, so Shraddha wants me to explain the question again. Is there anybody else who would like me to explain the question again? Irrespective of that, do you guys have any more doubts from sentence correction or sentence completion and sentence rearrangement? Please keep posting your doubts. In the meanwhile, we'll do this question again for some of you who want clarity on this question. The rest of you, please look through everything that we have done today. Tell me about your doubts. Okay, let us look at this question with a very fresh perspective again. Remember how I talked about do not look at the options first. First, understand the question and then eliminate the options on the basis of what you have understood and what mandatory pair you have made. Looking at this question, sentence A suggests that it's telling us about the Earth's core, the fact that it constitutes about 55% of the Earth's radius and it is so far from our feet. This is the only information that we are getting from sentence A, statistics about the Earth's core. Sentence B says and yet, which again says change of tone. Its effect on humanity are immense. So when you say it's definitely talking about the core because all the sentences are talking about the Earth's core. So we get a slight hint here that probably statement A and B could be together because I'm telling you that it is so far and yet it has effects on humanity. But we are not too sure about it, so we will not take this as a mandatory pair for now and we'll move ahead and see if we get some better options. So statement C suggests that the liquid outer core, it causes magnetic field which shields us from the solar wind. So this statement is again talking about in detail about the Earth's core. Remember how we talked about mandatory pairs and introduction always from general to specific. Obviously I'll tell you that the core exists and only then I'll tell you how it is useful. So probably statement C will come in the later half first when I have introduced the core. So let's see if we find a better introduction statement because A was telling us that the core exists and later on it's telling us the uses and the functionalities of the core. So remember C has not given us a lot of hints, but then that's okay. All we need to do is just find one solid mandatory pair to crack our question to the best possible accuracy. Moving on, statement D suggests that the Earth's core produces a lot of heat which leads to events like tectonic motions, earthquakes, volcanism, etc. Statement E again gives us two hints. The extent of these, what are these? Probably they are referring to the events in here. Statement D, again it is talking about the heat. So we have two statements in here that are talking about heat of the core. The rest three are different, which suggests that D and E are mandatory pair. Why D comes first? Because you are talking about the events here and these events you are referring to as these. So the noun comes first and the pronoun comes later, suggesting that D and E is a mandatory pair in that order. Let us now look at the options that suggest that D and E are together. We have option number 1. We can remove 2, 3 and 5 from our list. That leaves us with option 4 and option 1. Remember how we had initially suggested that there's a possibility that A and B might be together, but irrespective of that, option 4 we have to eliminate because it starts with B, because option B is dependent. I have to tell you first something and only then give its exception by saying yet. So the best possible choice here is A, B, C, D, E. I hope it is clear to everybody now. Guys, if you have any more doubts, please post. And I hope the session was useful. Thank you for your comments, guys. So we are wrapping up today. Practice questions, do well. If you have any doubts, you can always post it on our HitBullsEye website, official website, or you can just email them to us. So until next time, I'm signing off with the Big Bull. Have a great day.